simple, managing your finances. As Mansi introduced me, my name is Deepika. I am the co-founder and COO at Bases. Bases was founded by Henna and me. Henna also happened to have founded Lean in Bangalore. And yeah, we've been a part of it for the last 5 years. Very recently, we stepped down from active roles, and Mansi and the lot are doing a tremendous job at running Lean in Bangalore. So I come with an experience of over 12 years in the space of wealth management and investment advisory. I worked with a boutique financial advisory for 10 years and went on to work with one of India's leading fintechs called Fisdom. And Henna was at the time pursuing her master's at Wharton and had been in the fintech space on the technology front. And I was working on the wealth management front. And it just made sense to join forces. We've been friends for over 2 decades now. And especially so in our interactions with the women at Lib, we realized that there is such a huge gap when it comes to women and money. So our personal experiences, our professional experiences, plus interacting with the Lean in Bangalore community helped us identify how we could address this problem. So yeah, Basis has been around for 2 years now. Yeah, close to 2 years now, and I think we've done a good job at coming so far. So what I'm going to request you all to do now is, I know some of you, I know you all are on the app already, but for those who aren't, a little later in the conversation, just for each of us to, run by our own numbers, calculate your own goals. How much should I be saving? If I want to save 5,000 bucks, is it going to be enough? We'll run through a bunch of calculations. So I'd request you to download the app. It's just BASIS Basis on the App Store or on the Play Store. And even post today's chat, we can continue conversations on the app. So I'd request you to do it right now so we're not wasting time later into the conversation. So before I get started, I want to hear from y'all. If I were to ask you, and let me establish correctly because I get very strange responses sometimes. Think of money as a person, like literally think of it as a person. How would you describe your relationship with that person? Like you would describe your relationship with a partner or with your parents or whoever. How would you describe that relationship? Easy, complicated? What do you think? Yeah, is your relationship with money? How would you describe it? Okay, trustworthy friend. All right. Trustworthy friend, if we have enough of that friend and that friend is around. Okay. Mona says in love with it. All right. Okay. Enabler. Yes, absolutely. Money is, of course, and Vidya says scared of it. Yes. Security, 100%. Nobody has a comfortable, easygoing, uncomplicated relationship with money. Amazing. Okay, stable so far. Okay, I like the so far. Underutilized, a little complex. Okay. Okay, cool. It's good to you if you treat it well. Absolutely, Nakshatra. Yes. Cool. The reason I asked is because this is important, and you should perhaps even, and the idea behind today's conversation is not just for you to learn, it's also for you to then have these conversations with women around you. So this is a good question to ask your friends, on a conversation, that how would you describe your relationship with money? Because as women, we don't know, or we're not comfortable broaching the topic of money. So these simple tips make it easier to start talking about it, because very unlike men who are so open about all money matters, where I'm investing, how much I'm earning, what I'm going to do with my money, as women we've not culturally been taught to talk about it so openly. So let's try and change those bits as well. I did want to highlight this number, although it is a slightly dated number. It is from a Standard and Poor's research, and I highlight this number because invariably as women we tend to depend on the men in our lives to help us make financial decisions. So these could be our partners, these could be our father or a friend or a coworker or that relationship manager at the bank. But I think it's important to note this, in which tells us that 73% of urban Indian men and 80% of urban Indian women are not financially literate, which is to say that, yes, exactly, Nirmala, the gap is not much. Only 27% of men and only 20% of urban Indian women are financially literate. So, ladies, if you're depending on the men in your life to help you all make those decisions, honestly, they don't know a lot more than we do. And I think the gap for both genders is important to not just like fill the gap, but also I think this numbers are very dismal, and overall like literacy levels have to improve, and hopefully today's conversation is one enabler in that direction. But yeah, Nirmala, like you said, gap is not much, it can be easily filled, and for various reasons as women we're much better money managers, and we'll talk about it in a couple of moments. So financial planning, does it sound fun? Financial planning, so fun. What a fun 2 hours we're going to have now. Oh, Laksha saying yes. So Vidya's also saying yes. Nice. Okay. Mm. So, in terms of today's conversation flow, I'm just going to start off with something very simple. And for a couple of you, you all might be doing some of this stuff already. So, as fun as a root canal, yes, Mona, no fun at all. But yeah, so we're going to start with budgeting because that's a query we've been getting a lot. In fact, we had rolled out a form as well, and we did get some responses to that extent. I'm going to start off with the simple tools of budgeting, no Excel sheets and none of that. Going to move on to talking about investing actually, and I think a topic which is very important in the current scenario, talking about credit cards because. I've just realized women are not very comfortable holding credit cards, and we'll talk through some of those issues as well. And we've all heard the line, girls just want to have fun, but we've just taken a twist here. Girls just want to have funds, and there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing to be apologetic about wanting to have enough money in your bank account or feeling financially secure or making your own decisions. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and we don't need to hold ourselves guilty for wanting to have more money. Money is not a bad thing as long as the intentions are good, right? So I think yeah, this is something we really need to absorb. Before I continue, so is this how you feel about money? I spend too much. It just comes into my hand and goes even before I've like figured out. I used to be this way. I want to say, yeah, things have changed, but okay. Okay, so a bunch of us saying no, a bunch of us saying I used to be this way, but not anymore. It's never enough. Yes, it's never enough. Not really, but I can be smarter. All right. Okay. Is this how you feel about money? If not the previous way? No? Anyone feels stressed about money? No. Okay, in in the current moment, I am very stressed about money. Like I said, even though I know I'm well planned, I'm still quite stressed right now. Okay. Sometimes yes. All right. Okay. How much is enough? Okay, there's a question mark after it. I don't know how much is enough, but I hope to help you figure out how much is enough post this conversation quite often in the current situation. Okay, cool. So we will talk about that as well. Uh, do any of us follow any budgeting methods? Do you like follow any budgeting method, or it's literally like cash inflow, cash outflow? I don't know what happens in the middle. Okay, 50-30-20 rule. All right. Just tracking inflows and outflows. That's not a bad thing, Laksha. I do that. I just track inflows and outflows after I followed various methods. That's what works for me. Mm, I write down a monthly spending, but never go back to it after writing. All right. Okay, Nirmala, we will address that as well. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk as through two budgeting methods, which I think work personally, both of which I've tried in one way or another, and one simple cash flow management. So I want to just start with the first one, which is called a 6-jar budgeting method. I forget, I know someone mentioned the 50-30-20 rule. I forget how it breaks down, but I do remember I tried it. It didn't work for me. So we will talk about the 6-jar budgeting method. We will talk about Kakebo. I love Kakebo, and because it's really well explained and it brings about a lot of behavioral changes in the way you manage your money. And yeah, the last one, like I said, just budget, just track your inflows and outflows in case the other two might seem complicated for you. So the 6-year budgeting method is not very complicated. It starts off with something as simple as saying, your 55% of your income should go towards necessities. So for those who have not followed any budgeting before, a good way to start off is like allocating, if your income is say a lakh of rupees, 50 to 55,000 for necessities. 10% of your income should go towards, long-term savings. It's also important to have 10% as a play jar because like some of, and I'm sure I'll get these questions later, I want to invest in stocks, or I want to do something like crazy with my money, I want to buy and make an impulse purchase, but that shouldn't happen from compromising on other elements. So 10% of your money can be in a play jar. 10% can be towards your immediate, I want to say financial freedom. I would request if everyone could put your mics on mute, please, because Mansi, if you could do that, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
I did it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So 10% on financial freedom. And I think especially so in the last 1 year, if there's one thing I have learned, and I know I talked to a couple of ladies in the community, so I know this as well, a lot of us have been investing for our own, if not education, just like keeping up our skills or improving our skills. And that's a big enabler. So I think 10% really should go back to our education. And again, especially so in the current environment, 5% of our income for the next couple of months, giving, paying it forward. A lot of us I know are feeling very helpless right now. We can't really physically help in any way. So the simplest way of doing it is donate it to charities or organizations which are working with it. So, okay, great question, Nirmala. So, like I said, your play jar is something where you may not mind losing that money also. So for instance, oh, I have like, 10,000 bucks, which maybe I want to experiment and invest in stocks and see where that goes. So you could probably do that with your Playjar money. Or, I want to buy like a mobile phone 2 months later. Let me just put it aside for that. Financial freedom is so that in a particular, so long-term savings is for, say, your retirement. It is for we have a home purchase coming up in the next 5 to 7 years. I want to park some money for that. Financial freedom is more immediate in many senses, where that realization, or you will need that gratification a couple of months, I want to say within the next 12 months. So financial freedom is something which is more immediate, and long term savings are anything that could be coming up in the next 5, 7, 10, 15 years. Is that helpful to understand? And Playjar is where you can risk your money. So both in long-term savings and financial freedom, you might think of your money very differently. But in a play jar, okay, I've set this money aside. I can play around with it a little bit and not worry too much about what the consequences are on that. Is that clear? Was that helpful, Vidya, Nirmala? Cool. All right. So, what these are just recommendations on managing your money. they are goals to get to. I think, like, especially for those who've not started, like Mona, we were talking earlier, right? Maybe for you, just starting with putting aside 10% of your income towards long-term savings is a good way to get going in that direction. So these are not definitive rules. You don't have to follow 55% only to necessities and 10% only to savings. I, like me personally, I prefer to save more than 10% for long-term savings. So you have to figure out what works for you. But in the absence of any method, this is a good start. This gives you some direction in getting started. You don't have to follow it blindly. Yes, exactly, Mona. Depends on your income as well. Depends on your income, because here, if you notice in this method, there is nothing on loans and EMIs, etc. Right? But in some cases, people will have those liabilities, so those need to be managed slightly differently. But yeah, like I said, in the absence of anything to get started, this is a very simple structure to get you going. Any other questions here? Cool. All right. So I will continue. I cannot lay emphasis enough on education and giving. And I'm not talking about education only registering for a course or anything. There's so much to do when it comes to self-guided education. I'm doing a bunch of like financial planning courses over the last couple of months where I'm not working with a teacher or anything, but yeah, it's a lot of self-guided education. It is expensive, but I know that 10, 15, 20% that I'm investing into myself every month is going to pay off in the future. And yeah, giving, again, it's so important right now. And I think this is a question we've also been getting in the last couple of months, because a lot of women want to have a side hustle, and not just women. I think everyone wants to have some kind of a side hustle where, in the absence of an active income in the future, you have some passive income coming through. So if you do have a skill or hobby which you think can help you generate that secondary flow of income, please work towards it. And you will need to invest some money probably, and setting this pool of money aside is extremely helpful in going in that direction. So, Kakibo, I couldn't find my book. Otherwise, I would have shown it to you all physically as well. So, Kakibo is a household accounts, bookkeeping method from Japan. And like I was saying, this is very behavioral. It really helps you identify your own attributes about money. And very, I think a lot of all of us have heard of like Mary Kondo and like cleaning up your cupboards and cleaning up your room. So what Kakibo does is a very good way of like cleaning up your finances. And the four main areas are, it asks you how much do you have to spend. So it's making you question yourself. Okay, how much do you have to spend versus how much you want to spend? How much would you like to save? How much are you spending currently, and how can you improve next month? So what this does is, on a month incremental basis, it helps you improve your habits. So you might realize in the first quarter you have terrible money habits, but once you start asking yourself that how much do I have to spend, like what are my necessities, how much do I want to save no matter what, it'll help you identify areas where you're willing to cut down on certain spends. And overall, it helped me. It was very therapeutic also to write down in that book. If you don't want to buy the book, there are various options available online, and you can just download a sheet or two. But I think the book it's not very expensive. I think it's 250 or $300 in that range, but it really improves your behavioral habits. And for those who think you have bad relationship with money, you might just realize you have a really good relationship, because you hadn't done this before to realize how it's working for you. This is a little flow chart about it, but basically it is doing nothing more than each time making you ask that question, that do I have to save or do I have to spend? Where should I be saving? Do I have to make this purchase, or what, it can be avoided? Will someone else be happier with this money? If I'm making a purchase, is it essential, or it can be deferred to a later time? But it really helps you prioritize and identify which areas of money are working well for you, which aren't, and what is that improvement that is required. Much like any other Japanese methods of doing things, it's very well thought through one, so it saves you that time of trying to create your own method of managing money. So it also, like I was saying, it's very like Mary Kondoing your money, asking yourself, especially in times of like, when we do set aside money for impulse purchases, that can I live without this item? Based on my financial situation, can I afford it? Will I actually use it? And I know for Bangalore, we still have space. I know for people in other cities, space is such a huge problem where just like accommodating stuff is problematic. So do you even have space for it? So answering a couple of these questions helps you realize if that purchase is for you or not. And there are a couple of like recommended Kakibo strategies. I know a lot of us apply it. I do some of these. And For instance, leaving the items for 24 hours now that we don't go to stores, etc. So just putting in the basket, and I know I've got this from a lot of women in the linen community as well. I leave it in the Myntra basket, or I leave it in the Amazon basket, and I come back to it and I realize I don't want it. And that's a really good thing to do. Just put it in that wish list. And most times, so what happens with me is when I come back, that item is not available. So even if I want to buy it, it's not there. So I think that's working well for me on saving a ton of money. Don't let these blowout sales tempt you. Literally every month there is some sale. There was Holy sale, now there will be Eid sale. Before things settle, there will be Independence Day sale. Then there will be like Halloween, and then there's Christmas. It's always going to be there. So money not saved on spent on it. So yeah, I think what the problem is in a sale is we think something is 50% off, right? But in the absence of that sale, you would have not spent that 50% at all. So unless it's something you actually need, not a smart idea to spend on sales, because you're not saving money at all. Check your bank balance regularly, not regularly enough to give you anxiety, but regularly enough to keep you in check. So once a week, maybe on a Sunday night or a Monday morning when you just start work, check your bank balance as well. So like, oh, is this amount making me comfortable or not? Because I know I have like threshold limits where below which I get very uncomfortable with that money in my bank account. So set that limit for yourself and check on it regularly, because it really helps you not make unnecessary spends. Right now, of course, we can't spend in cash, but a good thing to do is probably, and I think it's working for most of us, is UPIs, right? So spend through that, because it's not on a credit card. It Not spending on a credit card avoids mindless spending if you don't keep yourself in check. And yeah, I think change the environments that cause you to spend, because we all know how Instagram works. You name something and it's on your Instagram like feed in the form of an advertisement and like nudging you to buy. So unfollow those influencers, unfollow those pages, unfollow those like subscription emails. I literally did that yesterday. I sat down for a couple of hours and cleaned up my inbox, and I cleaned up like and unfollowed several people, because yeah, I don't want to spend unnecessarily. So change that environment. You can't change your physical environment, you can change your online environment, and please do it. It's very helpful. Vidya, yes, we will talk about credit cards. That's why I said, in case you're good at using credit cards, I think it's the smartest way to manage your money. I don't own a debit card. I haven't had a debit card for over 2 years now. But if you're not good at managing credit, then you know what, UPI is the best way to go. The last thing you want is accumulating credit cards and bills, which are tough to pay later on. And I think we really need to become unapologetic about some stuff, especially now. Okay, now it's slightly different. We're not going out as much, but there would be situations in the past where, if peers or friends are doing something, and you don't feel so comfortable saying that's not in my budget, but you know what, it's totally okay to do it. I think people have that sensitivity and sensibility to understand it's okay to say that's not in my budget. You know what, I can't participate in that activity, or I don't want to pool in for that particular thing. It's absolutely all right. I think self-preservation is number one. If there's one thing like 2020 has taught us, is self-preservation is number one. Financial, mental, emotional self-preservation. So just focus on that, and you don't have to be apologetic to anybody. uh, Please get your refunds. So I'm a big fan of Schitt's Creek, which is why I've used it here. I don't know if any more are coming up later on. But yeah, please get those refunds. I know a lot of people who have like parcels coming home and we're like, okay, we'll do this later. Or you know what, it's only 300 bucks. Like, let it be, I'll give it to someone. You never end up giving it to someone. It lies at home for several days. Just, fix that return and get that refund on your money. It's your hard earned money after all. And I think it's also important to keep our family members in check, and they also need to keep us in check. So for in my equation with my husband, it's we have like reverse relationships with money. So I'm Sindhi, and for those who are familiar with how Sindhis are, I think I'm much more prudent when it comes to managing money. He's Punjabi, and again, with the default like assumption of Punjabis, he's probably a little more gregarious or generous when it comes to spending, and I really need to keep him in check. And as does he on with me on certain things. So have these conversations, keep one another in check, even if it's your sibling or your mom, or and then give them rights to keep you in check as well. It really helps on saving on unnecessary spends. So we talked about the six jar budgeting method. We talked about Kakebo. I really recommend Kakebo. Please give it a shot, especially if you like to write. I know Mansi for one likes to write and physically like look at stuff. So if you like to write, if that works for you in changing your behavior, please do so. And if none of that works for you, we can just follow the simple cash flow management, which is like our simple inflow, cash outflow, and everything that comes in between. So for you, I think for all of us, when you want to understand what expenses are essential, just think about a scenario of not having a job. So if you've never thought about how much money should I have in my bank account at any point in time, just think of, in case I don't have a job, what are my expenses which will still continue? And I would love some inputs here. So in case, let's assume my scenario, if I were to tomorrow like lose my job or choose to take a break where there is no regular income, what are typical expenses that do not honor the fact that I don't have a job? Those expenses will still continue. What would some of those be? EMI, rent, food, groceries, utilities, internet, okay. Loan, home loan, of course. House help, salaries, yes. Anything else? Children's education fees, of course. Medicines, okay, medical expenses. So very high level, it's our utilities, it is any loans and EMIs, it's our household rent, it is other groceries and medical expenses. So just think, if you don't know how to budget, you know what? Let me just think, how much am I spending a month on things that I should not be living without? I should not be living without a medical budget. I should not be living without money to be able to pay my rent, etc. So just think about it that way. And likewise, also think about things that might be variable. Like if I have extra money, that's a nice expense to make. But yeah, in the absence of money, it's okay. I can live without that particular expense. So this is very simple. Just put down your fixed income and fixed expenses, and variable income and variable expenses. Because Okay, so somebody's put Netflix as necessity. I would have thought differently, but I think especially in the current environment when you just want to switch your mind off from everything else, it is a good distraction, and it's perhaps okay for variable. Even if it's for fixed, I think it's okay. One form of like one OTT platform or another is very helpful. Yeah, please share it if you can. Four people sharing Netflix works out really well. But yeah, so I think yeah, this is basically what it looks like if you don't want to follow any fixed method. Quick question here. So when it came to what you did with your money in 2020, 2021, whether it came to like major spends or whether it came to investments, what did you do with your money in this period? FDs, liquid funds, yes, Mona. SIPs and mutual funds, all right. Okay, Mona said SIPs. Anyone else? What did you do with your money? Donations, all right, amazing. Savings, sure. Disha, if you don't mind elaborating, what kind of savings? Invested a little in the market when it was low, equities on dips, okay. FDs, mutual funds, insurance, donation, all right, that's a bunch. Share their sales donations, gold ETFs, awesome. So we're a bunch of very very active investors, which is increased health insurance. Great, Shruti. We're going to be talking about that in the next segment. Cool. So overall, I think we're all in a good place. We all have done something or the other when it comes to money, and hopefully, most part of it's we've done right. But I think since it is the beginning of the new financial year, it is till May 1st, we could make changes in things which didn't work so well last year, or in case there's more to do, we can definitely try and incorporate that. Oh, so we've all heard of this term for women used in a very derogatory manner, one time or another, where women are called gold diggers, and we're changing that conversation. We're calling ourselves gold diggers. We all have financial goals, and I think it's like as you were saying, it's we have to be unapologetic about wanting to have funds, and you have to be unapologetic about wanting to have financial goals, and we'll talk about how we can set some of those. We've all heard it, you keep reading articles about this stuff, but how do we actually put it into practice? uh, cool. I also want to talk about before we get into why we should do goals. I also want to talk about why some of us don't put down financial goals or plan our investments. One is I have no idea where to start. I don't know where to begin. It's also overwhelming. So you know what? Let me just not do it at all. Okay, once I put down my goals, then what? The process from there on is so difficult to understand, and I'm better off not knowing, or my husband or my father or my brother takes care of this stuff for me, and let me not bother, or this is too risky, let's not touch it at all. So these are typical scenarios or typical excuses that we've heard for the most part. And for those who are, I did see some of you mention you're just in the beginning of your investment journey. So I'm going to come to the details a little later. But in case you don't know where to begin, you're finding this whole goal planning overwhelming, you don't want to get into it right now. Guess what? A smart way to start is 1 day's worth of your income. So I'm not even saying put aside 20% of your income, put aside 10% of your income every month. Let's assume we have 22 working days in a month. Let's imagine your salary is 44,000. Your 1 day's income is 2,000 bucks. If you don't know where to begin, start with that 2,000 bucks, and you can improve on that. Okay, 3 months later, you realize, you know what, I can do 3 days worth of income. So if you don't know where to begin, 1 day's worth of income is a great place for you to get started with your money. Coming to financial goals, so what I've done here is I've put down very very broad goals. You can play around with this. So, maybe for someone buying a house is not coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. It's not a medium term goal. It's a longer term goal after 5 years. Or maybe somebody's marriage is coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. So you need to plan differently. So I've just put down goals for the immediate future, which is within the next 12 months. We've put down medium term goals, which is in the next 3 to 5 years, and long-term goals, which are 5 years and beyond. And in the midst of all this, there's also short-term goals, which I've not put down because it can get overwhelming. So there's immediate, which is up to 1 year, short-term, which is in the next 24 to 36 months, and then 36 months on. But if you notice below each of these, I've put down certain mutual fund categories which will help you get there. So today we're not going to be talking about products. I'm not going to tell you go buy HDFC top 200 fund or go and buy Axis mutual fund. We're not having that conversation. We're just trying to build structures which we can then improve on and learn and invest. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a moment. I would request all of you, and I have a quick question for you here, and I'm going to need your answer. I want to buy a car. Is that a goal? I want to buy a car. Is that a goal? Okay. Almost everyone is saying yes. Mm. No, it's not a goal. I want to buy a car in 2025. Is that a goal? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, that is also not a goal. I want to buy a car worth 8 lakh rupees in 2025. Is that a goal? Yes, specific amount is a goal. So if when you're putting down a goal, don't put it down as a wish like this. Want to buy a car, want to make down payment. You have to attach an amount and a timeline to it. So I'm going to give you 1 minute. I would request you to put at least one goal in each of these categories. So one goal in immediate, one goal in medium term, and one goal in long term. Put down an amount and put down that particular year where you think you will need that goal. I'm gonna give everyone like a moment to do that. Let me know once you all are done. So one goal in each category. So you can just type in done once you're done with it. If you're comfortable, you can share it here. It would be nice if you're okay to share it. Maybe I'll share a goal or two as well, because it'll just help. A little later, we're going to calculate how much we need to save for each of these. So yeah, if you're comfortable, you can put it out in the chat box, or you can share it privately with me. Okay, Vidya says immediate 6 month emergency fund. Good that you brought it up, Vidya. So if you don't know how much I need in an emergency fund, uh, you should put aside at least to begin with 3 months worth of your expenses. So we talked about those fixed expenses that you cannot live without, that you have to pay for every month. So let's assume you put down, okay, my rent plus my groceries plus kids education plus transport or whatever comes up to 50K a month. You need to have at least 3 months worth of expenses kept accessible. Ideally, I would say 6 months, but to begin with, 3 months is not very overwhelming to start. Okay, so Vidya says immediate 6 month emergency fund. Sakshi says travel in the medium term. Vidya says retirement in the long term, not sure of the number. I'm glad you brought up retirement, Vidya. I really appreciate when women start thinking about or talking about retirement. I'll help you calculate how much you might need for that retirement. Okay, Shruti says travel in the medium term. All right. Cool. So, like I said, as you notice below each of these, we've put down a category of funds that helps us get to it. So overnight mutual funds, as their name goes. So you know what? A lot of finance is in the names. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. Like, Mona was mentioning earlier, she does liquid funds. Again, it's in the name, liquid. What could it mean? They're liquid funds, they're easily accessible, they're most probably low risk because you know what, you could need your money at any point in time. So similarly, overnight funds are something which you can withdraw overnight. The rate of return on these is slightly better than what you're getting on your savings bank account or on your fixed deposit. And they're almost as safe as those instruments. These are good because they're giving you a better rate of interest, especially for those who are earning more than 10 lakh rupees, falling in the 30% tax bracket. These are probably better tools of parking your money for immediate requirements. Pavitra, I would like to stay off taking names of funds or recommendations, but I can tell you this, like all mutual funds have liquid funds and overnight funds. You name the fund house, whether it's ICICI, Axis, Birla, whoever, they all have categories of liquid and overnight funds. The rates of returns on these are not very different. It's very, very minimal in terms of return differential. So again, and I'm going to need your help here. So we said overnight funds, I can access my money whenever I want it. They are low risk instruments. Let's move to the next category, which is medium. And what I've put down here is balanced funds. And I'm going to need your help here. Balanced funds, what could it mean? Balanced. It's in the name, balanced.
That's equity and debt both, right? Medium risk.
It has equity and debt both. Yes. So for those who've not heard of this before, think of it as, you know what, some portion of it has some risk. Some money out of my investment goes into stocks, and some part of my money goes into safe instruments. So about, you know what, typically balanced funds have like a 60-40 ratio, where 60% of that fund amount is invested in stocks and 40% is invested in secure assets. So if a fund size is 10,000 crores, then about 6,000 crores will be in stocks, and about 4,000 crores will be in certificate of deposits, will probably be in a couple of FDs, will be in a couple of corporate deposits, etc. So balance funds are good for a 3 to 5 year period, which leaves us with equity funds. And as you can see, we've said equity for long term, which is 5 years and beyond. I know there's a ton of free advice, especially in the last 1 year, where last March the markets fell to a very low level and they've doubled thereon. And everyone seems to think that either you missed the bus on that and you could have doubled all that money you have. I wish we were all Nostradamus and knew what was going to happen, but that's not how life works. Equity funds are risky. There is a high element of risk attached to them. They are not quick money schemes. They are meant to be invested in an incremental manner, in a disciplined manner, and especially used as vehicles for long-term goals. So don't think of this as quick money. If you have long-term objectives, these are good tools to get you going in that direction. At this point, I just want to use the word. Uh, I will take that question on ETFs a little later because gold is a separate category. So I will take that question on a little later. I have one quick question for you all. Do we all know what an SIP means? So we all know what an SIP means. And if you don't, please say no, because the whole point of today's conversation is for us to discuss this stuff. I don't fully understand it, or I don't know what it means at all. Okay, Sakshi says no. Almost everyone else says yes. Great. We all understand what SIPs mean. Uh, cool. So what I'm going to do here is for the benefit of those for us to understand the impact or effect SIPs can have on our money. So for those who don't know what SIP is, it's called systematic investment plan. I'm going to repeat this one more time. Systematic investment plan, because I'm sure at the end of the session I will have someone ask me, Deepika, which SIP fund should I do? SIP is not a fund, it's a method of investment. Much like an EMI is a method of paying off a loan, where a fixed amount is deducted from your bank account every month and goes to pay back that loan. Similarly, an SIP works in the reverse format, where a fixed amount of money moves from your bank account to a particular fund of your choice on a fixed date, and you start building on that wealth. So how your EMI pays off the loan, the SIP helps you in building on your wealth. So what I've done here is just taken the example of somebody who started $1,000 SIP. She continued doing it. It's a slightly dated number. I need to update it to 2021, and it's going to look much better than it's looking here. But I've just taken the example of somebody who started ₹1,000 SIP, and she did it for an 18-year period. So, she continued in 2003 when markets were not so good. We are all at least familiar with what happened in 2007 and 8 when there was the global financial crisis. 2013 again, things were not really good for the global economy. At no point did she stop this investment. So these are actual funds. However, I've removed the names because I don't want people thinking, oh, this fund A, this is good for me, let me put my money there. That's not how you invest your money. So in the best performing fund, had she put her money in the best performing fund, over that 18-year period, she would have invested 2.16 lakhs. Let me just change that. It's 2.16 lakhs, not 21.6 lakhs. She would have invested 2.16 lakhs. And in the best fund, that 2.16 lakhs has grown to 28.9 lakhs. And in the worst fund, that is grown to 16 lakhs. So in the best fund, she's got this amazing 25% return every year. In the worst fund amongst that category, she's got a 19% return a year. So my question, even in the worst fund, is that a bad return? No, can I see some? It's great. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make here is not, hey, let's go pick the worst fund right now and invest our money there. But the point being that this discipline and consistent investing really pays off in the long term. You probably won't see the impact of it in the next 1 year. You'll probably not see it even for the next 5 years. But this thing really accelerates if you keep it going consistently. Obviously, you should be checking on your funds ever so often. You should be making changes with the help of an expert if something is not working. But I know a whole bunch of people who've made investments and forgotten about them, who find these documents 10, 12, 15 years later. I'm sure we've all heard these stories. Oh, I had invested 5,000 rupees. It's 1 lakh right now. You know what? You didn't know you'd put that money. You didn't know where you'd put it. And suddenly this paper comes up. We shouldn't be in that category also. But if it helps, if you're someone who is otherwise too anxious, maybe like just put it, don't check it too often, but often enough to make necessary changes. But just being disciplined and being diligent with your savings is a great method to build wealth. Because we always have these goals that I'll invest when I have 50,000. I'll invest when I have 2 lakhs. You don't need to wait for that. You can get started with like amounts as low as $1,000 a month. So whatever works for you, but just get started. And if you're already doing it, then see how can you create like incremental investments this year on. So what I've done here is I did mention there are also short-term goals that could come up. So what if money is required in the next 12 months, you could park it in savings bank accounts or in FDs or liquid funds or overnight funds, whichever is giving you a better rate of return right now. If you have short-term goals which are coming up in the next 12 to 36 months, debt funds, FDs, balanced advantage funds are a good category. Likewise, if you look for long term, There are more options that we've put there. There's equity funds, there's stocks, there's PPF, there's your employee provident fund, real estate, gold. Because the other problem is we all want to do everything all at once. I want to buy gold also, I want to do equity funds also, I want to do PPF also, my EPF is also happening, but you don't need to do everything all at once. Once you identify goals, it helps you identify what is that investment vehicle you need for it. So for instance, retirement, if it is 10, 15, 20 years away, you know your employee provident fund is contributing some part to it. But you also know the employee provident fund is a fixed rate of interest. Unfortunately, over the course of the last few years, it's been going down, which may happen for the next couple of years as well. So, you know, I need to have equity fund as well, which helps me accelerate and like compound my money better than the PF is doing for me. So once you put down these goals, it helps you identify instruments which will help you get to these amounts. Is this clear? Cool. I'm just going to do a quick time check. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. All right. So, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Yeah. There is this thing called rule of 72. A lot of people for some reason think I've made it up and they ask me why 72. I have not made this up. There is this existing rule in personal finance called the rule of 72, which helps you identify how many years it's going to take you to double an investment. This is especially useful when it comes to where instruments where there's a fixed rate of interest, and y'all can help me here because a bunch of you did say y'all invest in FDs. I've never invested in an FD in my life. For whatever reason, it's never happened. I actually don't know practically how that's going to work out. But anybody who's doing an FD or has done an FD recently, what's the rate of interest you get on that FD, or you're getting in the current scenario? 5.4, 5.5. All right. So y'all can help me with this calculation. So Nirmala said she's getting 8%, which is great. I had invested earlier. Sheetal saying 5.1, Shruti saying 5.5. All right. So y'all can do this calculation. In that FD, 72 divided by 5.5, how many years is it going to take you to double your money? 22. Oh my God. Okay. 13 years. So this is a basic thumb hand rule, okay? This is not assuming compounding and inflation, etc. This at a very high level helps you understand, you know what, approximately how long is this instrument going to take to double my money. So for instance, like Nirmala said, she's invested in an 8% FD. So it's probably going to take her 9 years to double that money in that particular fixed deposit. So for a 5.5% FD, how long is it going to take? 13 years. All right. Sounds fun. 13 years to double my money. No? Okay. I don't want to scare you all further, but I definitely want to do this exercise with you all. Just give me 1 second. Cool. So I've taken very quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I've taken the example of 3 people. Somebody who does a 3,000 rupees investment every month, does it in this balanced fund. And she does it like, yeah, I'm being very ambitious about how diligent this woman is. She does it for 30 years, 3,000 bucks every month. Oh, you know what? I can afford it. I don't have to think too much about it. And I'm going to do it through my working life. Her friend starts 10 years after her and says, you know what? You did 3,000. I'm going to increase it by 50%. So I'm going to do 4,500. She does that 4,500 rupees in the exact same fund, except that she does it for 20 years because she started 10 years later, of course. There's another friend, I want to say the bad friend, who says, you know what, you did 3,000, I'm going to triple the investment. I'm going to do 9,000 bucks a month, except that she started 20 years later and she's doing it for 10 years. Again, chosen the exact same fund. Uh, so the third person here, so she's invested 9,000 every month, does it for a 10-year period in a particular fund, has invested 10 lakh 80,000. So has a second one who did 4,500 for 20 years, and all of them have over a varied period of times invested the exact same cumulative amount. So as you can see, for the lady who was doing 9K every month, her money has grown to about 21 lakhs in the course of 10 years. Any guesses for the smarter one? How much has that 10.8 lakhs grown to? Any guesses? You don't have to get the exact number. 40 lakhs, okay. Anyone else? 30, all right. Let's have a look at it. It's about 45 lakhs. Uh, any guesses on what it's for the third person who was doing 3,000 every month for? Oh, I like that, Vidya. You just double this. Okay, let's have a look at that number. Yeah, it's about a little over 1 crore. Yeah. What happened here? All of them had invested 10 lakhs 80,000, right? Like, what happened here? Compounding. Duration, exactly. Compounding duration, power of SIP. So not just SIP. This was, of course, an SIP. I'm going to change this. I did see someone who did mention compounding of FDs. So let's just change this. I'm just going to take, suppose she didn't do this in an SIP, in a balanced fund. She did it in a recurring deposit, which says, you know what, I'm going to give you 6% every year. And that's 0.5% every month. So let's just see what happens. So what grew to 1 crore rupees in a balanced fund in that period in a recurring deposit has grown to 30 lakhs. So it's not just the duration and the effect of compounding, because compounding applies to all investments. It also depends on what instrument or what vehicle of investment that you choose. And I do want to highlight one more thing here before we move on. Just give me 1 second, because a lot of us ignore this fact when it comes to FDs, and this is very important to sort of know, is that your FDs are taxable, and they're not taxed at that 10% TDS, which all of us think is the default. Your FDs are taxable as per your income slab. So if you're earning 5 to 10 lakhs, your FDs are taxed at 20%. If you're earning about 10 lakhs a year, your FDs are taxed at 30%. So what you're getting after taxes on an FD is 4.4% in the case of somebody earning, say, 7 or 8 lakh rupees. And what you're getting on an FD, if you're earning more than 10 lakh rupees, is 3.8%. Sounds good? Very exciting returns. It's going to help me achieve all my financial goals. No, Mona, don't break your FDs. That's not what I want you to do. We do need that security as well. But I think they serve as good instruments. They serve as good instruments for the short term. And by short term, I'm saying, yeah, within the next 12 months, I want to keep this emergency fund. Great. FD is probably the place to be. But anything beyond that, we might need to think of things differently. There are, of course, so many instruments to talk about. We can't fit that into this 2-hour conversation. I'm going to definitely try and highlight how you should evaluate these instruments for yourself. And the most important or the most effective way to evaluate if something's working for you or not is by understanding inflation. Inflation is a economics term, yeah, nothing but the rise in price of goods and services that you might use. So what I've done here is taken the rise in price of certain things over the last 10 years. So a bottle of cola, 2-liter bottle of cola, which was 55 rupees in 2011, is now about 90 bucks. A liter of milk, which was 22 bucks a liter 10 years ago, is actually, it's not even 45. I should change this. I just bought milk like today, so it's closer to like 54 bucks, which has gone up by 100% over the last 10 years. Education. So education course, which perhaps costed 13.5 lakhs 10 years ago, is around 23 lakhs right now, has gone up by 70% in the last 10 years. Quick question for y'all. If somebody was earning 22 lakhs 10 years ago, what are the chances that that person is earning 45, 50, 55 lakhs right now? Salaries have gone up by 100, 150% in the last 10 years. Sakshi says less. Okay. Rare. Okay. Sorry, what? Sorry. I go to full screen. Yeah, sorry. What are the chances that 50% chances? Okay, I have very, very conservative. In certain industries, it does happen, but in most industries, it doesn't. Of course, I've noticed maybe in the startup world, etc., it does happen. But again, one observation is that, I see this happen so much. People jump jobs for that increment, but over time, somehow it all evens out. And you know what? There's one part of it is, of course, your performance, but the other part that you absolutely cannot ignore is years like 2020 and 2021. None of anything that's happened is in your control. You must have been the best performing person on your team and were expecting that like 18% hike, but guess what? You got 8% for no fault
It's
of
not on
yours.
video.
So it's important to know that inflation is not in our control, which is the rise in price of stuff is not in our control. Our increments are not in our control. The only thing in your control is how you invest your money. And the simple point of evaluation can be, what is this investment instrument beating inflation? Because if it's not, then it's not working for you. And I'm just going to share like a small anecdote. I don't know if like Mansi's heard a bunch of my stories before, so I don't know if she's heard this one. But yeah, so I got married in 2017. My husband works in the IT sector. He works with Accenture, has been there for 11 years now. And 2016, he had got an amazing hike. And 2017 for him work-wise was a much better year. And I'm probably never going to forget this and talk about this for the rest of my life. But we just gotten married, and I took a break from work. I'd been working for 10 years. He was going for a project to Australia, so I was like, oh wow, like this job makes you travel the world and all of that stuff. And this was November 2017, a couple of months into our marriage, and he had his appraisal call or whatever, and we knew it was not a good year for the IT sector, but we were like, okay, you won't get an 18% return, you'll get a 12% return, right? I mean, 12% increment, right? So he put me to listen on that call, and we heard all the good stuff. Oh, you did well. Oh, you got this rating. Oh, this recommendation, blah, blah. Obviously, all we cared about was that number, right? Because you know most of the other stuff already. And you know what? You did much better than last year. Okay, great. So immediately I was like, oh, 18% better than last year, probably 21%. And okay, increment is 3%. And there was like one moment of silence. So I thought this was some kind of a terrible joke. And as did he. And he was like, sorry, what? He was like, you know what? Your increment is 3%. And obviously, my husband was really upset hearing that. And his consolation from his counselor is what they're called in the IT sector. You at least got 3%. Most people have got 0%. And I do remember this was the same year that I think Capgemini shut their resignation option on their portal. So people were going crazy on Twitter saying, I want to resign. So IT industry just didn't do well that year. And for me, it was like, you know what, you've got a 3% hike. Even our rent goes up by 5%. What kind of job gives you a 3% hike, right? And for me, if not anything else, that year was a realization that this is not in our control. So the thing we need to do is at least invest our money where we're able to meet our incremental rents every year, right? It's as simple as that. So what I've done here is I've just drawn this inflation line, and above the inflation line, I've put down investment vehicles that beat inflation, and below this inflation line are investment vehicles that don't really beat inflation in most scenarios. So below the inflation line, we've put down FDs. I did show you all the return of FDs, like we saw in the case of those earning more than 10 lakh rupees. What you're currently getting on an FD after taxes is like 3.8%. That's half of inflation. You're losing money. You're not making money on a fixed deposit. I'm going to come to insurance later, so I'm not talking about it right now. Bonds and PPF, although PPF rate is at the moment 7.1%, I still do think it's a good vehicle of investment for the long term. It provides that safety and security. For the long term, you're better off in a PPF than in a 5-year FD or a 7-year FD. It also gives you tax savings, so that definitely helps. Gold again is interesting. It did show like major movement in early 2020, but since then nobody's talking about gold very much. Conversation, of course, has shifted to bitcoins, which I'm not going to talk about because I don't fully understand them. But gold is a good security in a portfolio. It's not something you should look at making money from. So if you're investing 1 lakh rupees, 10,000 rupees is a good amount to have in gold as an investment. So don't count your gold jewelry as an investment, because you know what, we're never going to part with that. And even if you buy gold coins, we're not going to part with it. So if you're looking at gold as an investment, you can do it in like financial form. You can do gold ETFs in case you have a demat or a trading account. You can do gold ETFs. In case you don't, you can do gold mutual funds. There are the sovereign gold bonds of the government, which are a good investment option. So there are various different ways of doing gold apart from buying physical gold, which is also a safety and security like issue, right? Like opening a locker or keeping in the locker at home, etc., may not make sense. So you can consider financial instruments for gold. Real estate, okay, it does provide some growth over the long term, but it's also important to know that real estate is not easy on the pocket, right? Like much like your SIP, you can't just decide one day I want to buy an apartment. If you want to buy a 1 crore house, it's a 20-25 lakh down payment and then a commitment for 15-20 years to pay an EMI. And a lot of people, when they do that rent versus buying calculation, you may realize that, you know what, I'm better off living in a rented home. And when we do these calculations, it's especially better in cities like, I want to say, Bangalore, Chennai, etc. It may not work in places like Bombay, where rentals and EMIs are almost the same amount. So but it does work in certain geographies. And if in case it's not affordable for you, we're not forced to buy homes, right? And I think even things are changing so much on the work front, where you might need to move cities, you might move countries. So it's not very sensible to be married to a home, which often happens for some people. And yeah, we did talk about equity funds already, which is investments which are suitable for 5 years and beyond. I'm not going to talk about stocks too much because they are tricky. You need to understand so many variables when it comes to investing in stocks. And if that's not something that's comfortable for you, then you're probably better off choosing the equity funds route. Like I liquidated my entire stock portfolio when I got married. And it was doing well, but it was still giving me sleepless nights because I was like, well, you know what, I need this money for sure, but I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's not a comfortable feeling at all. So at least that part of, I know I have mental peace when it comes to that element of my finances. But yeah, if you do have somebody who's an avid stock investor, can help you understand, can help you play around with it a little bit, and definitely go for it. I'm just going to take the questions that we see here. So Vidya says, where does recurring deposit fall? So Vidya, recurring deposit is in the same category as FDs. So what is a recurring deposit? I can't put 1,20,000 in a FD at one time. So I'm going to do 10,000 every month for 10 months, 12 months. It's the same. It's like an SIP, except you're doing it in a systematic manner towards building an FD of sorts. Sheetal, I would like to understand your question a little better. So if you could help me with some more details. Okay, Dr. Asha says, if we take a home loan, do we get the whole amount paid towards house as tax free or what? Dr. Asha, you get the EMIs that you're paying towards the home, you get tax benefits on that front. Mona, no, we're not talking about research of funds, but Basis is having a session next Saturday on choosing mutual funds. If you want, I'll leave the details. You can join in. We don't have the time to get into research and performance of funds at the moment. Yes, Nirmala, I'm going to talk about insurance right now. Mm, we'll come back to credit. I think let's talk about insurance before that, especially exactly the one that you spoke about, which is insurance linked mutual funds. So there is, first of all, nothing called insurance linked mutual funds. But there is something called ULIPs, which is unit linked insurance plans, which are nothing but they invest in equities or some other investments, and there's some element of insurance as well. Let's talk about that right now. Okay, we have until 6. I'm going to try and wrap up before 6 itself, but I do want to cover all of this stuff in some detail. So I'm going to talk about life insurance to begin with. I've taken the example of a 30-year-old person, and this is actually someone I know and purchased this policy. A 30-year-old person who bought a life insurance for 20 years, and they told her that you need to pay ₹1 lakh towards that policy every year. The sum assured is 16.95 lakhs. So, sum assured means if something happens to her, the family's paid out 16.9 lakh rupees, and if she survives that 20 years, she's going to get 34.5 lakhs. So she would have invested 20 lakhs, 1 lakh every year for 20 years, and she's going to get like 34.5 lakhs after 20 years. Does this sound good? If she passes on, family gets 17 lakhs. If she survives, 20 lakhs grows to about 35 lakhs over that period. Sounds good? Not really. Okay. Not sure. Okay, I'm gonna help you make understand this better. So her 1 year's income was more than 17 lakh rupees. So if something happens to her, 17 lakh rupees is not even worth her 1 year's income. It's not even going to give her family cushion for 1 year's expenses and things. So is that enough? No. Okay. And the maturity value. Yes, it is terrible. And maturity value of 35 lakh rupees. When I did my calculation, a Maruti Wagoner will cost about 35 lakh rupees 20 years later. So if so, what happens when these policies are sold to us that we are shown these very inflated numbers and nobody tells you the return. So if I just look at it, you know what, 35 lakhs looks like a good number. But when I calculate that I'm putting 20 lakh rupees and I'm getting 35 lakhs, when you do the return, it's about 5.5%. So you'd rather put your money in an FD. Why are you giving it to an insurance company and locking it for 20 years? You can do that much on your own. And the whole idea of, so first of all, let's try and establish in the context of life insurance, who is this insurance for? Who is this life insurance for? Is it for me, or is it like for my spouse or someone else? Who is it for? Dependents. So most of us are on the same page about this. Life insurance is not for you. It's not, oh, if Deepika survives, she'll get this money back. So if I want to do that, I'll do an investment. I don't need to buy an insurance. An insurance is if I have financial dependence, yeah, right now I'm contributing some part to, our joint household management. Tomorrow, if I have kids, we're going to contribute something jointly towards my kids' education or future. And I know in the absence of my income, that goal will be hit. So if I'm not there, if there's no active source of income, there has to be somewhere that the money will, like, of course you can't replace the emotional loss, etc., but that financial loss can be taken care of, and that's where insurance comes in. So insurance is not about you. It is about your financial dependence. And if you don't have financial dependence, and if you're not going to have them in the future, you don't need a life insurance. It's only for those who have financial dependence right now or are going to potentially have them in the future. That's where life insurance is needed as an instrument in your life finances. And what I've done here is, let's assume that, because it's for easy for me to use people's names and faces as examples. So I'm going to use Mansi. Sorry, Mansi. So let's assume this was Mansi, and Mansi said, you know what? Had I not done this option A, I would have still had 1 lakh rupees with me every year to do whatever I want to do with it. So Mansi buys a life insurance plan, which tells her that, hey, Mansi, if something happens to you, your family will get 50 lakh rupees. You're going to pay 7,000 a year towards that. And if you survive that 20 years, which is obviously amazing, you're not going to get that 7,000 per year back. And just think about what is 7,000 a year. It's cheaper than a Netflix subscription. And I'm sure our life is worth more than that. So she says, you know what, I'm buying this policy, 50 lakh rupees. I'm going to pay 7,000 a year. And I have 93,000 left to invest wherever I want. So in these calculations, I've assumed, 1 year she did gold, 1 year she did balance funds, 1 year she did equity. So I've assumed a bunch of different things. And you know what? That 93K per year grew to 67 lakhs. So she's much better in scenario two versus giving her money to some insurance company where everybody other than her is making money. It's that insurance agent. And typically, why do we buy those, LICs or money backs? Because you just started earning and your family's like, first thing you need to do is buy an LIC. Or there's some uncle or aunt who's an agent and you want to do them a favor, which is why we buy insurance. Or of course, tax saving. End of the year, don't know what to do. This guy is willing to give me the receipt in 1 day's time. Let me just buy that insurance, not realizing you're committing to it for a really long period of time. And it's not easy to get out. And more often than not, it's not recommended to get out because you're going to lose more money than anything else. So yeah, so Mona says that's exactly how I got fooled into mine. And these people will never give you those returns in writing or any of that. So if anything, just ask them that, you know what, can you give this to me in writing? I'm going to get like 12% return or whatever. They'll never tell you. They'll only show you these numbers. Oh, you invest 20, you will get 40 lakhs. Not helping you evaluate the opportunity cost of that money. Yeah, but just to repeat, if you have financial dependence, you need a simple term plan where you pay a fixed amount of money every year for a high life cover. But if you survive that period, which is what should ideally happen, if you survive that period, that money doesn't come back, but it's actually a pittance for the kind of protection it gives you on your life. It's very, very affordable. And I've just taken very broad ranges here of age. So for a 25-year-old woman, a 1 crore cover comes in at about 560 bucks a month. For a 35-year-old woman, a 1 crore cover is at about 760 bucks a month. For a 45-year-old woman, it's about 1,200 bucks a month. So it's also recommended to take it while you're younger because it's cheaper. So I took my first term insurance when I was 26, and I took a 80 lakh cover, and I pay 5,600 a year towards it. And I'm going to pay 5,600 till I turn 65. So, and when I wanted to take another 80 lakhs a couple of years later, it was so much more expensive. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I had like taken 1.5 crore back then than now when it's so much more expensive. And also it's important in this, and I don't want to make this like a gender thing, but it does happen with men. When they take term insurance policies, an important thing to note is uh, policies only get rejected in most cases, whether it's life insurance or health insurance, is when the person who took the policy did not give all details or there was no full disclosure. So for instance, I know men buy term plans saying they're non-smokers because it's cheaper. But you know what, if something happens and that was caused by a lung problem, your family is not going to get that 1 crore or 2 crores or whatever. It's not going to happen because you thought I'll save that 10,000 bucks by not declaring I'm a smoker. So you need to give full disclosure for life and health insurance. It really impacts a lot of stuff. Vidya, if you could elaborate on that question a little bit further, it would be helpful. Mona, yes, if you do foresee a scenario where there you're going to leave that job or you're going to be in between jobs even for a couple of months, please have a term insurance. More often than not, I've observed this impact happen in families where somebody's taking a break. They're taking a break for a couple of months, and you know what? Somebody like needed to use a policy, and there was no policy. Or if you're like somebody like my husband, who I foresee is going to be married to Accenture forever, then you can, in fact, increase your employer's cover as well. You can pay a certain amount and increase that coverage as well, because they have their typical covers which may not work for you. No, so Vidya, you have to declare all health conditions. If you're a smoker, if there's thyroid, if there's PCOS, like for instance, I wanted to take at one point, I was evaluating taking a cancer care policy, but I have PCOS. So I was rejected because chances of me or I have like yeah, higher chances than an average woman to get cancer. So it's important. Like the companies will not take that risk on you. So yeah, Dr. Asha, so I would recommend, if I were to very like broadly say, I don't like recommending options, but if I were to look at the top few, if you were to look at ICICI, if you were to look at Kotak, if you were to look at HDFC, you can compare the term insurance premiums on these companies. And term insurance is very simple. These are three good companies. Buy it from whoever you get it for cheaper, because they all more or less are the same. Where you get it the cheapest, you buy it from there. Also, whoever's claim settlement ratio is high. So for example, if they tell you claim settlement ratio is 97%, it means out of 100 policies, they've honored and paid out 97 of those policies. And like I said earlier, in most cases, policies are not rejected because of the company, it's rejected because of the individual did not declare all details, and the family suffers the consequences of that. Uh, so I think it's also important, nobody talks about this enough. It is critical illness. So health insurance is, of course, something you need in case you're hospitalized. Life insurance is something that helps your family if you're affected. If there's a loss of life, your family benefits. But what happens if I'm diagnosed with a critical illness? What happens if I'm diagnosed with cancer? What happens if I have a stroke and I can't go back to work for 10, 15, 20 months? I do need something that's going to keep me afloat for those months. So that's where critical illness comes in. Critical illness typically has about 35 to 40 illnesses listed, where in case you were to be diagnosed with any of those, you can provide that proof to that insurer and they pay out that amount. And then you can use that amount as your monthly income or for whatever reason that you might need it. So again, what I've taken here is across various companies, for a 5 lakh critical illness for a 30-year-old non-smoker, the premium at the max is like $3,000 a year. So it's very inexpensive. I remember I took my critical illness, I want to say 3-4 years ago, and I think I pay 11,000 rupees a year for a 20 lakh cover. So if something happens to me and I can't work for X many months, that 20 lakhs will help me keep afloat, and I'm paying 11,000 rupees per year towards that amount. So critical illness is very helpful if you don't know how much to take. 15 to 18 months of your income is good. So if your monthly income is 15,000 bucks, 15 to 18 months of your income is a good start. Because yeah, if something happens, I know I will not go back to work for at least a year or a little more than that. Health insurance, of course, we are all aware of, if not ever before right now. The need for health insurance is only increased, and that 3 or 5 lakh coverage which you get from your employer is not sufficient. As an adult individual, we at least need a 10 lakhs cover. And there are simple things where we can't talk about it in detail. I don't want to make this salesy, but yeah, at basis I want to say every month or every 3 weeks, we have one detailed topic. Like next week, we're doing mutual funds. We did do health insurance a month or two ago. We will be repeating it. We will talk about it in detail, but because I can't cover Corona, etc. right now. But you do need a comprehensive health cover. If you're in your 20s, you definitely should ensure that maternity is covered. Okay, Shweta also just asked a question on, is maternity insurance required if the corporate covers expenses? Yes, Shweta, I think so. Because, for instance, I was just reviewing my husband's insurance, and I think there was a cap of 70,000 rupees or something on the maternity insurance. And likewise, at the same time, I was just for like knowledge, I was evaluating like motherhoods packages, etc. And it was like 1.4 lakhs for a 3-day maternity stay. And the company is giving you only 70,000 rupees. So it does make sense to have maternity insurance on your own as well. Ritika, I'm just going to do a walkthrough of the Basis app because the goals that we listed earlier, I want to help you calculate that. So I'll also show you where you can get information on our upcoming sessions. Shweta, I hope that was helpful. So Shweta is a big ambassador of Basis, if I may say so. Yeah. Cool. So we talked about life insurance. If you have financial dependence, get that term insurance cover. As women, we definitely need a critical illness cover in case of any major illness that does not allow us to go to work. Health insurance cannot emphasize enough. At least an individual should have at least a 10 lakh cover. A 10 lakh cover for a 35-year-old woman comes in at about 10,000 rupees a year. That is very affordable, and I think your health is worth that much. The more comprehensive the plan, of course, the better for you. Ananya, I will need some more details on that. I can take that upon. Maybe if you write to me separately, I can do that math and help you with that number. I do want to talk about credit for a moment, credit cards, and then do a quick walkthrough of Basis with y'all. Uh, because I know a lot of us want to, not want to, you will probably need to take a loan at some point in time. So a credit score really defines the rate of interest the bank gives you on a particular loan. I'm hoping we're going to use this loan for things like home or cars and not personal loans and things like that. So credit score really helps a bank evaluate, you know what, is this person worthy of even giving a loan? Is this person going to pay back that loan? And if they're not so consistent, maybe let's give them a higher rate of interest. Because you know what, I know like Deepika probably is good at paying back her loan, but her husband's credit score is not good, so he's going to get at a higher interest rate. So that's why your credit score is important. A credit score is between 300 to 900. It defines your credit merit, and lenders, whether it's bank or non-banking institutions, they look at your credit score to decide whether you're worthy enough to give a loan or not. And I think as women, like I was saying, we're very diligent with paying stuff back on time. A credit card is actually a good instrument if you use it well. Those points are very helpful. It helps you build that credit score and credit history, which helps the bank evaluate if you're worthy of giving a loan. So if you don't know where to begin on getting started on building that credit score, the simplest route is through a credit card. So for instance, I have two cards, but one of my cards I've had for the last 12 years. And I barely use it. I just keep it going every month. But that's the card that's defined my credit history. That's helped the bank know that, you know what, this person pays stuff back in time, and we can lend to her without worrying uh, too much. So there are a couple of credit bureaus in India, and different banks use different information from these bureaus. Typically, a score of like 75, 750 and above is a good score, which defines that this person is worthy enough to give a loan. They're going to pay it back in time. So your credit score is calculated basis your payment history, whether you pay back in time, are you paying the full amount in time, or you're like really delaying on your payments, your credit utilization. So if your credit card says, you know what, you have a 5 lakh limit, you don't have to use the entire 5 lakh limit. A good credit utilization is 30 to 40% of whatever limit the banks gives you. So your probably credit score will be higher if you're using 1.5 lakhs versus 3 lakhs. So 30 to 40% of your credit utilization is good. Like I said, I kept this one card for really long because the credit age is very old, and it helped improve my score over time. And in case you don't take a credit card and the first instrument of borrowing you take is a personal loan, then that affects your credit history adversely. which means that, there was some situation in your life where you probably did not have enough or were not financially sound enough. So you took a personal loan to really, bridge that expense. So that reflects adversely on your loan. And for bigger loans, home loans, etc., they don't just give it to you without a credit score. So it is important to start building that credit history and credit score to show your credit worthiness. Loans are approved much quicker. You get much better rates of interest on loans if you have a healthy credit score. So there are typically four institutions which evaluate credit scores, but the most common that you probably have heard of or will hear of are CIBIL, TransUnion, and Experian. CIBIL is the most common or probably the oldest one that's used in India. Uh, so for instance, I'm just showing you, like, I just took a screenshot of my credit score on one of these apps. So it's 896 of 900, and more than anything, it has been impacted by my old card, and which is why it looks as good as it is. And if you notice, it also tells you what your credit history is, like 47 or 47 payments made on time in the last 4 years or so. So a better credit history, especially for women. And I was in fact just listening to a video just before this session talking about how women in India are accessing credit a lot more and are much more credit worthy than men. So even in families, you might notice, which affects women adversely sometimes, is that loans are taken in the woman's name and not the man's name, because he has some mispayment at some point in time. So the woman has a better score. But yeah, in situations like a separation and divorce, this stuff really affects her very badly. So when you're taking joint loans and things like that, be very careful. So yeah, that's more or less on the conversation. I will come to the questions, Dr. Asha. I do want to do a quick walkthrough on our goal calculations. I'm guessing most of you have downloaded the app. If not, it's just BASIS Basis on the App Store or on the Play Store. I'm just pausing my screen for a second, and I'm just going to set it up and share my screen so that y'all can view it and we can do the calculation together. So it's just BASIS Basis on the App Store or on the Play Store. Just one second, I'm just gonna share that here again. Yeah.
I've shared the link as well in the chat. So
Yeah, you can also just if you're at your system, you don't want to pull out your mobiles, you can just go on app.getbases. Just gonna set this up. Guessing you all can see my screen, right? Huh?
yes.
Cool. So it's just Basis BASIS on the App Store or on the Play Store. This is what it looks like. So for those who were asking, how do you keep updated with what sessions are upcoming on Basis? We have it right here on the banners. So the session I was mentioning, which is happening next week, which is with an amazing financial advisor we have on board, Namrita. It is on the types of mutual funds. So Mona, this session might be helpful for you. It is happening next Friday. You can just click on the link and register it. I know we didn't get time to talk about health insurance enough, but in case you do want to talk to an expert and evaluate if the policy you have is good or not, or more importantly, if you want to increase your health insurance coverage, you can click here and talk to an expert who will help you evaluate the right policies for you. And we do have a community. So like I said, we can continue this conversation there in case your questions go unanswered here right now. In the absence of time, you can ask any question related to money, or you can share something you've learned even within the community. Our community is fairly interactive, a bunch of experts who reply on various questions. So while you get answers from peers who are in similar situations, you also get answers from experts. I am going to get into the advisory bit where we can do one or two goal calculations. I don't remember who it was. Somebody mentioned earlier on retirement goal of 1 or 2 crores. I'm not sure of the number. So if you're not sure of the number, we do have a retirement calculator, and we can play around this with this. I'm happy to just, here you can put your own number. I'm putting my numbers. 35. Okay, let's say wants to retire at 65. So this is really important to note, okay? So what happens when I ask somebody what will your monthly expenses be in retirement, they inflate it to some number of their own assumption. So what we're asking you here is, if you were to retire today, if someone were to tell me, Deepika, you can retire today, children's education, you created a goal, you took care of it, you bought a house, your insurance premiums are all done. Now, if you don't have all those responsibilities in today's terms, what is a good amount? So if I think about it and assume, okay, I have no rent because I have a house or whatever by now, or all other responsibilities are taken care of, let's assume I say I need 1.2 lakhs per month. I want to have like a good retirement in today's terms. So this is not to scare us. Here it tells me that if I want to get to that number, because we assume inflation and we assume if you park this 5 crores in a FD, what's the return you get, etc. So this tells me that based on the information I've input, I need to put aside at least 5.4 crores to have that retirement that I'm expecting to have. So for those who were not sure of that number, you can play around with this and put in your numbers here. I used to have a sheet, and when I had friends over, I used to always open that sheet until people stopped coming to my house, because I think it's so important. No one talks about retirement enough. I think it is the most defining goal in our lives, and we tend to ignore it. So identifying this number really helps you know, okay, how much is my PF going to contribute towards it? I have the national pension scheme. Is it going to help for my retirement? If it's not, what do I need to change? So that's on retirement. In case you're planning a career break, which does happen for a lot of us, most times it's unplanned financially. We've created a career break calculator. I'm not going to explore it now. You can play around with it. You want to take a break for 1 year, you want to take a break or need to take a break for a certain period of time. It'll help you identify how much to save. So Mona, we have assumed till the age of 85. If not more, I can reconfirm on that. I want to say it's 90, but it's definitely till the age of 85. Because with the kind of healthcare we're getting, we're going to live longer. I don't know how healthy we will be or what condition we will be in, but we will be alive for longer. Uh, so for those who did put financial goals, you can just plug in your goal here. So I want to say travel, very aspirational in the current scenario, but let's assume, okay, things get much better by May 2024, 2 years from now looks good to take a really nice vacation. And that really nice vacation, if I were to have taken it today, is going to cost me about 3.5 lakh rupees, two of us taking this trip to Europe for a week. So what's happening here is, if you notice that inflation on travel is more than inflation on any other average goal. Travel gets expensive by about 10% every year. So what cost me 3.5 lakh rupees right now is going to cost me about 4.6 lakh rupees 2 years from now. So I actually need to save to get to that particular number. And since this is really close a goal, I'm not going to be able to take risk with this money. So I'm going to choose like something moderately conservative or conservative, something safe to help me get to that particular amount. So now this tells me that, hey, if you want to afford that 4.6 lakh rupees 2 years from now, you need to start saving 11,500 this month on to get to that number. And what the app also does, it does give you some recommendations on where to put that money aside, but you don't have to go by this. More than anything, I want you to know how much you need to start putting aside every month. We can help you with the where as well, but more important is how much based on your risk profile, etc. In case you've not done a risk assessment before, you can take a short test on the app, which helps you identify your risk profile. Like I, for one, I'm an aggressive investor. I most of my money is in equity, then I'm very comfortable with risk because I know key what I need for the short term, I have that set aside, and what's for the long term, I'm not worried about it very much. So I'm an aggressive investor, but I know a lot of people who are risk averse and or moderate risk. This helps you identify that. So one way of doing this is of course putting goals down, but another way of saving is also saying, you know what, I don't really have like these goals etched in my mind, but I want to put aside 10,000 bucks every month. How do I do it? So you can just hit on gross savings and say I can do a recurring investment every month of 10,000 rupees. I don't think I need that money for at least 5 years. That's something I'm comfortable with. And if it's a longish term goal, you should be okay taking some risk because that's when your money will compound. So I say, okay, I want to go with like a growth sort of a profile. So what this tells me is that I'm going to do 10,000 every year for 5 years. I would have invested 6 lakh rupees, which grows to about 8.4 lakhs over the course of this time. And again, similarly, gives you a recommendation on a bunch of a combination of investments to help me get to that particular goal. So you can play around with this. I'm not going to spend more time on that. I think if you do want to understand money more, I know I've tried to cover at least the basic concepts, but if you do want to dip into the details, we have what we call knowledge boosters. We have about 30 of them on the app. They literally take you like 5 to 7 minutes to complete. In fact, we had someone from the LIB community tell us that, when my baby goes to sleep at 10 o'clock, every night I take up one new knowledge booster. It's a good activity rather than scrolling on Instagram. We've tried to make it very palatable, easy to understand. I don't know, it's not playing here. My screen is not reflecting, but you can just hit on the booster section down, which is a rocket ship. And you can learn a new concept like in 10 minutes because we don't have time to read 20 articles. We don't even know if those articles are helpful. Sorry, Mona, if you click on the my screen is stopped mirroring my phone for some reason, but if you click on a particular fund, it gives you all details related to that fund. You should be able to see everything related to that fund, the fund returns, the fund manager, all of it. Okay, I will look into that. I will look into that. Sure, yeah, you can ping on the app. So, Mona, if also what we recommend on the app is we have done the evaluation of whether this fund is good for you or not. So we're not giving you 20 options to choose from. We filter those options, and this combination is something that's going to help you get to your goal. Cool. So Mansi, in case you just want to put the feedback form
Yes.
here. Yeah. And I will look at the questions that we have. I know we have a couple of minutes left. I would request everyone, if you could put on your cameras for a moment, we can take a
Yeah,
quick
we can take
group
a picture.
picture. I see a bunch of other dropped off, so it would be nice to. Okay.
Shreya, Kavya, Shividya.
Sakshi, Pavitra, Laksha, Sanjana, Aarti. Awesome.
Ranjita, Pavitra. I'd love to see your faces. Shruti, Ritika.
Cool. I think we'll go for it so that we have time for questions. Yeah. Money, let's say money, ladies. Money brings a smile. Thank you. Cool. I'm just gonna see our questions. Mona, the CIBIL score on the CIBIL website, I think it's a 400 rupees charge or something. You have to pay for 1 month or for a quarter or something like that. I think I've registered for the quarterly thing, but you do get it free as well. On a couple of websites, you get it for free, but
Okay.
rest assured you'll be harassed by their teams because you have to give your phone number. That's the cost of.
I don't want to know it that bad.
You can download OneScore. There's this app called OneScore. You can download that,
Okay.
and so basically, I'd share a screenshot from OneScore of my.
Okay.
I'm just looking at Ananya's question. Yeah, so Ananya, I know Dr. Ananya and Dr. Asha, I would need more details on to evaluate this because I need to evaluate, if you're taking a loan, what return can you expect on that property, etc. That's how you evaluate if that EMI is worthy for that particular investment. So I'm going to leave my email ID here because if you have any specific questions, because I can't, like a home loan is a very difficult recommendation to give here, but yeah, if you can give me more numbers, more details, and I'll be very happy to help you with that answer. Any other questions here? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask us.
I understand we'll be covering the mutual funds in details next week. I saw it's a session 2. I did not attend session 1. Is it going to be like a continuation?
No, it's not. It's
That's
not a
good.
continuation. Ideally, of course, it would have been good, but I think, yeah, basis everything that you've told me and whatever we've discussed today, it's good enough a foundation for
Okay.
yeah, you to join in on the next session. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Any feedback? I know you're not going to fill the form. Please fill the form. It is going to help me. It's also going to help
I want
Lean
to
Bangalore
know about
schedule. Yeah, sorry.
this.
I can't hear you, Dr.
Yes,
Asha.
or not. This is
Is it my network, Mansi?
much
Able to hear her?
Oh, it's
positive
breaking.
Dr. Asha, we can't hear you very clearly. If you want to type in the answer, I mean, type in the question. Cool. Any other questions, ladies? Yeah.
I've gone to this site, as valueresearch.com, tried to kind of maintain my portfolio there. I find it a little confusing. Are there any other instruments or sites where we can like maintain the portfolio amongst FD, SIPs? What all are you, like where all the money is there?
So, Ind Money is good. IND Money, they have quite a comprehensive base of investments that you can accumulate together. So I don't maintain much of my stuff online except for the mutual funds. I work with a financial advisor because I like that, like phone a friend type of option. it keeps me in check. But I think Ind Money, of what I've heard, is good because I know Grow, etc., are not as comprehensive. Zerodha also has 4 apps for 4 different things. So if you want everything in one place, I know Ind Money is a good platform, or so I've heard. Yes, Dr. Asha, I think Sukanya Samriddhi is a very good option for for the girl child. It is, of course, for girls who are 10 or below. You get tax savings on that particular investment, and it matures when you actually need the money at the age of 18 or 21. I think it's a good option. The rate of return also on the Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana has been unchanged for the last 6 months. So I think it's a good option if you don't have it already. Okay, Ranjita, I want to understand your question better. If you don't mind unmuting and you can ask me that question. Because emergency funds are funds where you should put your money where there's no risk.
Yeah,
So
is
for
it better to keep it in FD or invest in a mutual fund?
So I think an overnight fund is a good option to consider. If you've not done it before, I would say, I think, Mona, in the current scenario, overnight funds are giving slightly better returns than liquid funds. I think liquid funds returns are right now, if not the same as FD, slightly lower than FDs even. So overnight funds are slightly better currently. So yeah, Ranjita, if you've not done it before, I would recommend, before just putting all your emergency money there, put 10,000, put 20,000, withdraw it, see how soon it's hitting your bank account. Are you comfortable with that sort of investment? I think the best way to understand an investment is by dipping your toes and, withdrawing it, investing in it, seeing the turnaround times, and that really helps. And I think an overnight fund and a FD combination is a good balance to have for emergency funds.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So it's 6 o'clock. I hope you all had a good 2 hours. I hope I could cover at least the basic concepts. For some of you, it may have been too basic. For some, it may have been slightly complicated. But I hope, if not anything, you took away at least one thing from today's session. Stay tuned for other basis sessions and stuff we will, of course, do with Lean in Bangalore. Yeah, Mansi, over to you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Deepika, for taking this session. It was really good. I especially like the comparison between the life insurance as a insurance versus as an investment. So thanks a lot. And thank you everyone for joining us today, taking time out on a Saturday. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.